This is Dr. Kellner, and welcome to Fair Game. About a year ago, I was attending a conference, and I was sitting between two dear friends, both of whom were African American. The speaker, who was an Anglo-American, made this statement: Christian nationalism and Zionism are the same thing. They most assuredly are not. More on that later. But my friend sitting on my right dug her hand into my thigh and said, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." And the one sitting on my left put his hand on my knee and said, "Oh my God." Now, part of the problem in the political dialogue of America today are the unexamined assumptions around certain words. On the face of it, the idea of Christian nationalism seems benign enough. It is the suggestion that America was or should be and could be again a Christian nation, and that people are committed to that process. I would suggest, as an historian, that America was probably never more than an almost Christian nation. There were certainly colonies that were established with a Christian vision in mind, but I think calling us a Christian nation takes it a little bit far. Let me tell you why I think Christian nationalism is a problematic term. Let's start with the word nationalism. That is a word that was coined about 170, 180 years ago in Europe as empires were breaking up in the 1840s. And the notion came that every national group, French, Germans, Russians, Bulgarians, Ukrainians, Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians, Italians, should all have their own nation. Now, let's lay aside for the fact that that may not always be practical, that a piece of territory may be very small, it may be indefensible, it may not have the possibility of a solid economy, and that being part of a larger federal nation would be better for them. Let's just lay that aside. But nationalism, as it was articulated in the 19th century, suggested that the people, the folk, deserve their own government. And so nationalism propelled the development of Europe from then really to the Nazi time. And at the heart of nationalism is there are folks who have the power, there are folks who do not, and our mission is to wrest the power from them so that our group can fulfill its destiny. As the Germans said in the 1860s and 70s, our place in the sun. Well, in the thinking of that era, if they were going to have their place in the sun, it meant somebody else had their place in the shade. And there were a series of wars and conflicts from the 1840s clear to the end of World War II that were driven by nationalistic aspirations. I've often envisioned hell to function a lot like a corporate boardroom. And some really bright young PR guy was suggesting a way to wreck Europe. And he said, "I know what we'll do. Let's spawn the idea of nationalism, because nothing will tear the continent apart more than that." And I think that the evil one got on board with that one very quickly. He saw the potential. Nationalism leads to people feeling aggrieved. Let me give you an example. 1870s, 1880s, there was a land rush on Africa and Asia by the Europeans to grab colonies. The winners were the British and the French. The losers were the Austrians and the Germans. The continent nearly came to war in the mid-1870s because Austria and Germany felt shut out. And so the Germans come to the conclusion we need to be more aggressive. Now, as a German, I'm going to suggest to you that probably the last thing any German needs is to be more aggressive. But that was the plan. So they come up with elaborate battle plans for seizing territory in Europe, especially to the east, which was Russian territory. 1914, through a comedy of errors, after the assassination of the Grand Duke of Austria, who was the heir to the Austrian throne, within about 45 days, we were immersed in the First World War of the 20th century. 20 million people died. Nationalism was a driver. The drive for colonies and the sense of aggrievement on the part of the Germans lay right at the heart of it. Also, you had the groups who were aggrieved, like Serbs, who didn't want to live under the Austrians anymore. And the Serbian secret police were absolutely willing not only to abet, they were willing to help plan the assassination of the Archduke, as the archives of Russia showed when they finally became open in the last 25 years. Nationalism is a religion. Take a minute and just let that one sink in. It holds religious commitments. It has a belief system. It has its rituals. If you don't believe that, just look at how brilliantly Joseph Goebbels made that work for Hitler in the 1930s. The whole notion of the German Reich was built on German nationalism. The French didn't come far behind. It was a disease in Europe. And the end of the First World War didn't fix it, because the British and the French engineered a especially punitive treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, to punish the Germans. What they did was ensure that the next 20 years would be one economic crisis after another, one governmental crisis after another, until Adolf Hitler emerges as the leader who will fix everything. Part of the way he fixes it is by stressing Germanness as the very core of what it means to be in the German Republic. Well, what does this have to do with us today? A Christian nationalist is a person who drapes the old rugged cross in Old Glory. And that's a bad bargain. The cross stands alone. The cross stands as the judgment on all human sin, on all human pride, on all human pretension. The cross stands over against every form of human sin. A lot of sin has been done in the name of nationalism. One of the searing memories of my life is a black and white picture I think I saw for the first time in high school of the Ku Klux Klan walking down Constitution Avenue from the Capitol toward the White House. They called themselves Christian nationalists. They wanted to make America safe for Anglo-Saxons. America was being threatened, the Klan believed, by black folks, by Catholics, by immigrants. Now, if you grew up in the 50s or 60s, you think about the Klan, you think Mississippi, you think Alabama. The largest number of Klansmen in this country in the 1920s were in the state of Indiana. The governor was a Klansman. The Klan had an absolutist agenda of what it meant to be an American, defined by their own terms. I'm going to suggest to you that we have people, some of them are evangelical, some of them are cynical political operators who use evangelicals who have a Christian nationalist agenda. Well, I understand they are concerned about things like abortion and gay marriage, and they run hard against those things. But under it all is an idea to make America a Christian republic. Well, there's some obvious problems with that. We have 500,000 houses of worship in this country, and less than 20% of them are evangelical. So it's going to be a Christian republic. Whose Christianity is it going to be? Mine? You know, it really should be mine, because I'm absolutely certain of my own correctness on most issues, as are most of us. In a republic, the only way for people of different backgrounds, of different ethnicities, of different religions to get along is to agree to put up with each other. That is part of what our founders meant when they used the word tolerance or toleration. The first and most important thing to make this country work is that we agree to put up with each other. Now, this brings us to the other side of the equation, because I am certainly not going to only pick on my own tribe. You know, America today is in danger of ending up with two political parties, the Christian Republicans and the secular Democrats. And don't think for a minute that secular humanism is not a religion. It has a belief system. Part of that belief system is you are welcome to believe in God if you want, but please confine that to Sunday and keep it to private observations. It has no place in the public square. It has no place in the public schools, because we say so. And see, it's that kind of absolutism that you see in secular humanism on the one end and Christian nationalism on the other end, that just chews the center out of the country. And so you end up with these irreconcilable viewpoints. You say, well, how is it even possible for them to work together? I'll tell you an interesting story about what happened after the Revolution. During the Revolution, there was an increasing sense that state support in churches weren't really a good idea. And so in Virginia, there was a substantial movement to stop supporting the Anglican Church, the Episcopals, with tax money. That tax money helped pay clergy salaries. It helped support the operations of parishes. It didn't work terribly well. A fourth of the parishes didn't even have pastors. Most of them barely hung on, but it wasn't a brilliant strategy. So you had, on the one hand, someone very sympathetic to the evangelicals, or call them the revivalists, Patrick Henry, and a deist like Thomas Jefferson. Now, there's a debate about Jefferson's faith that's gone on quite a long time, but Jefferson's Bible pretty well should solve the question about what Mr. Jefferson believed. All you have to see are the parts of Scripture that he cut out, and it gives you a pretty good idea of what he didn't believe. But the Republicans, that is the Jeffersonians, the ones who wanted to disestablish the church, and the evangelicals got together, and in the Burgesses, the House of Burgesses, the legislature, they passed legislation to disestablish the church. How do you get that kind of consensus today? Well, I served on a school board in Springfield, Missouri, back when the Dead Sea was only sick. It was my first real engagement with public service. And a friend of mine congratulated me on the night of my election, and he said, tomorrow morning when you wake up, your IQ will drop by 50 points. The same folks who thought you were brilliant in voting you in will decide that now you are a babbling idiot. A lot of truth in that. Our town of Springfield had 30,000 college kids, 120,000 permanent residents, 6 universities. So we had a lot of town and gown issues. The universities are always wanting to buy more property. They're always wanting to grow their enrollment. Local neighborhoods are never very happy, especially with the fraternities. So there was always problem on that end. But the universities were always represented on the school board and in other parts of government. They tended to be people of progressive temperament. Because Springfield was the buckle of the Bible Belt, and we had more Baptists and Pentecostals than people, you had a substantial number of folks who thought, you know what, this is a Christian community and Christian values should dominate. One of the foremost leaders of Moral Majority was from Springfield, Missouri. He was my friend. He was a wonderful man. Now, it might also surprise you that when I ran, I was supported by the Black Pastors Caucus, organized labor, one of the teachers' unions, and by a lot of parent groups. How is it possible to get anything done when you have secular humanists on one side and you have Christian nationalists on the other? Well, it occurred to me that in that particular case, the first thing we had to do was focus on our mission given to us by the state constitution of Missouri, which is to provide a free and appropriate education for every boy and girl in town. That means making sure they can read and write and do math. The last time I checked, reading, writing, and math are not ideological. There's no such thing as Christian math, though. With my mathematically challenged brain, I've often suspected there was a demonic element in math. But there's no such thing as Christian math. And there's no such thing as secular humanist math. There's just math. There's just reading. So I found that, especially working with my colleagues outside of meetings and working with the professional staff, if we could figure out what we agreed on, it was possible for us to get things done. If there were things we didn't agree on, when we would be in strategic planning retreats, I would normally suggest that we defer those to another day. Chances were that they might not be as pressing as somebody thought they were. So in the years that I served on that board, Springfield, Missouri was one of the top 2 or 3 school districts in the state that had over 500 school districts. It's possible for us to work together. It is possible for us to do what's best for everybody. Now, if your particular vision is Christian nationalism, it's not my place to dissuade you of that. I happen to think it's a bad idea in America. If you're a secular humanist, I just think it's a sort of naive way of seeing the world to assume that everything got here by accident and that complexity comes from nothingness, to me, requires considerably more faith than I have as a Christian. But I digress. Here's my main point. It is important for us in this republic to try to find the things we can agree on and work on that. Those things will make a difference to our children and our grandchildren. It will lower the temperature in our communities. This is Dr. Gary Kellner, and this is Fair Game. Thank you for joining us today.